West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
At this point, not just for pregnant women, but for all Americans. Today starts a new era of very, 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 very big government. Very intrusive government.
Hey again, everyone. It is 5 o'clock in the East. I'm Alicia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace. And that was our colleague Rachel Maddow with a frightening prediction on the night the Supreme Court overturned Roe, stripping away the constitutional right to abortion access. She was right. In the years since, Republican-led state governments have invented new and disturbingly intrusive ways to assert control over a woman's private medical decisions. And it's led to this. Texas resident Kate Cox, who is currently 20 weeks pregnant with a baby that will not survive, had to beg a judge today for a desperately necessary abortion in order to preserve her health, to keep her baby from suffering, and to enable her to have children in the future. Now, just let that sink in. A woman in a medical emergency had to beg a court for health care due to Texas's anti-abortion laws. And to be clear, it is, in fact, an emergency. Kate Cox's attorney noted in the hearing today, her health is so fragile that in the time since the case was filed on Tuesday and the hearing today, Kate had gone to the emergency room for a fourth time. The judge granted her request, noting on the verge of tears that, quote, the idea that Miss Cox wants desperately to be a parent and this law might cause her to lose that ability is shocking and would be a genuine miscarriage of justice. It remains to be seen if the state of Texas will fight the judge's order today, as they have every time court in that state has sided to protect women and their health and bodily autonomy. But in a statement today, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton issued what can only be interpreted as a threat to Kate and to her doctors. Quote, the temporary restraining order granted by the Travis County District Judge purporting to allow an abortion to proceed will not insulate hospitals, doctors, or anyone else from civil and criminal liability for violating Texas's abortion laws. This includes first-degree felony prosecutions and civil penalties of not less than $100,000 for each violation. The order does not enjoin actions brought by private citizens, nor does it prohibit a district or county attorney from enforcing Texas's pre-Roe abortion laws against Kate's doctor or anyone else. The temporary restraining order will expire long before the statute of limitations for violating Texas's abortion laws expires. That is the top lawyer in the state of Texas threatening a private citizen in a medical crisis, putting a bounty on the head of her doctors. So you can get a clear understanding of what that would mean for her. This is what Kate has said about the horror she is currently living through. Quote, it is not a matter of if I will have to say goodbye, but when. I do not want to continue the pain and suffering that has plagued this pregnancy. I do not want to put my body through the risks of continuing this pregnancy. I do not want to continue until my baby dies in my belly, or I have to deliver a stillborn baby, or one where life will be measured in hours or days. full of medical tubes and machinery. I do not want my baby to arrive in this world only to watch her suffer a heart attack or suffocation. I desperately want the chance to try for another baby and want to access the medical care now that gives me the best chance at another baby. That is where we start this hour with Molly Duane. She is the attorney for Kate Cox. Also with us, the president and CEO of Reproductive Freedom for All, Minnie Tamaraju. Plus, with me at the table, host of Fast Politics podcast and Vanity Fair special correspondent, Molly Zhang Fast. Molly Duane, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know that you cannot give us details about Kate's healthcare for very obvious reasons. Can you, though, give us a sense of how she is doing?
Well, Kate is a mother of two and a proud Texan who has lived her entire life in Texas, who wants to be able to access the healthcare that she desperately needs in her home community. And despite everything, the ups and downs of today, she remains hopeful and optimistic. And that is what gives me faith in humanity.
Molly, what was it like to watch your client be targeted by Ken Paxton?
Unfortunately, this isn't the first time that I have seen the Attorney General of a state personally attack a woman in need of desperate health care. He did it again and again and again in the Zodahs versus Texas case, when we had each of the plaintiffs testify in open court, accused them of having fertility problems that were their own fault, accused them of being responsible for what happened to them and for not suing their doctors who held their hands crying, saying, my hands are tied by the state of Texas. And so once again, while I was not surprised, I was shocked. It is always shocking to see the top attorney for a state in this country treat its citizens with such callous disregard.
Molly, you said this during today's hearing, quote, only when a woman is about to die may an abortion be allowed. In other words, the medical exception is no exception at all. It is clearly too dangerous for her to be pregnant in Texas. Talk about what Kate's case shows us about the law more broadly.
This is really important for people to understand. Every time folks talk about there are exceptions for reasonable interpretations of the law where patients really need abortions, don't worry, those patients are getting the abortions. They're not. Ms. Cox is not getting the abortion care that she needs in Texas. And more to the point, the Attorney General of her state is saying that he should decide when her life is closest to death. When her life is on the line, he gets to decide, not her doctors. And that should be shocking and alarming to every citizen of this state.
Just to put a fine point on that, Molly, in the hearing you referenced some particularly disgusting passages from the state's filing attempting to undercut just how critical Kate's situation is. Talk about how far as a country we have sunk after Dobbs, where women are now being forced to beg a court for health care.
Well, I want to be really clear about something. This did not start with Dobbs. This is a decades-long campaign that anti-abortion politicians have been waging in this country. Roe v. Wade was never enough. There are so many patients in this country who never had access to abortion care under those restrictions. Yet now we find ourselves in truly a dystopian environment where a patient in the middle of a health emergency is coming to court saying, please, let my doctor save my life, save my fertility. And the state of Texas, with a resounding voice, posting on Twitter, sending letters to the hospitals, letters about this position, targeting her personally. I truly don't know what to say.
Molly, I want to play a little bit of Kate's experience in her own words. Take a listen.
It's a hard time, even with, being hopeful with the decision that came from the hearing this morning. There's still, we're going through the loss of a child. There's no outcome here that I take home my healthy baby girl, so it's hard, just, grief. But I think that, joy and grief can coexist, and there's moments of joy. I'm really grateful for my wonderful two children that I have and my wonderful family. And, it's a moment of sadness, but we really have a wonderful life here in our home state. And so, I just try to count my blessings.
That sound is from NBC Nightly News. Just a reminder, Molly, that even a win here is still a loss.
The fact that we filed the lawsuit at all is a huge loss in many ways. And I just want people to put themselves in Kate's shoes. Do you want your state deciding how you and your family choose to grieve? Because that is what is happening. The state of Texas is saying, we don't care about women's lives. We don't care about families or pregnant people. All we care about is forced birth. Even when, in Ms. Cox's situation, it's going to mean that she will have to carry to pregnancy a term that may result in a stillborn baby or a child who will suffer for the few short minutes of her life. And I know that is graphic, but it is real. And people need to understand that this is happening every single day. And while Ms. Cox was able to come to court today, 99% of people in this situation are not, and they are suffering every day at these cruel and inhumane abortion bans, which take away our agency as individuals and harm real families in Texas and around the country.
It is Friday, the 8th of December of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. That's right, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, how you doing? I seem to have a little bit of maybe a cold, little stuffy. Had a bit of a post-nasal drip yesterday. I'm sorry you have to hear this so early in the morning. At least it's early in the morning where the mothership is. Regardless, we will soldier through and try to get through this show without, well, too much discomfort for you and me. Alrighty. Well, the clip at the top has a very disheartening feel to it, and I will say that the backlash against what Ken Paxton is doing will be quite a backlash. They know not what they have done, apparently. They care not one whit for how they've suffered at the ballot box for their draconian, I don't know, what is it? They are ghouls. And I think that America is getting very, very tired of these ghouls. So I guess that means that women generally are going to be maligned. You can see that the war on women is ratcheting up by the attacks on Taylor Swift and Beyonce. I love how the eradicating the Jews from the river to the sea crowd are upset because Beyonce hasn't snapped her fingers and demanded ceasefire now. What? God. All right. Next thing we're going to hear from the, Stop the Genocide crowd is that Hanukkah is a war on Christmas. I'm telling you, it's AstroTurf. It is AstroTurf. Also, I'm a little confused about those Ivy League college university presidents who are unable to call anti-Semitism hate speech. Especially from, Stefanik. I mean, the whole idea of hate speech to the Republicans is that it doesn't exist. We already have laws against it. But it is hate speech. And we have to have, a backbencher, is she really a backbencher? Regardless. Elise put out some very pertinent questions, and she was rather pointed in her questioning of these university presidents who equivocated, stammered. God, I don't know. I keep saying that an Ivy League education isn't what it used to be, and now I'm thinking, was it ever? Jesus, think of all the people that came out of there. Well, before I begin on that tangent, I should take into consideration that all universities have exceptional students, and they always have some really shitty students, and then marginal students, and some good students in between. So picking out a few, really shitty students who rose to prominence that came out of Ivy League schools might be, I don't know, not as, stunning as I want it to be, because I think the ratio of all universities is the same. But it does amaze me that those who got an Ivy League education and who rose to prominence are such dimwits. Yikes. And then listening to these university college presidents trying to determine if anti-Semitism is hate speech. Oh, no, it's in the context. No, it's not. There's no context to anti-Semitism. Jeez. All you have to do is look at Elon Musk and his cesspool of anti-Semitism. Boy, he's out and out, like, RTing and liking Pepe accounts. Did you know there's a Bitcoin or, I think it's a crypto thing based on Pepe? And that's just A-okay, My God. Excuse me, my nose is a little stuffed up. I'm trying to work around it. Can you tell? Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and shorten this rant, the morning rant. We usually go on for another 10 minutes or more, but why don't we get down to brass tacks and give you a rundown of what we have in store for you in the curated part of the show. Give myself a little break here to clear my sinuses. So what do we have in store as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fabulous Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Senator Rick Scott of Florida is sounding the alarm about the national security risk posed by communist garlic from China. Yeah, communist garlic. The maternal mortality rate is much higher for black women than white women in Mississippi, and that might be a feature, not a bug. And the University of Michigan is launching a new effort to fight anti-Semitism. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a Moscow court extended the pre-trial detentions of 3 lawyers for representing imprisoned opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Wow, that's coming to an America near you if we don't look out. And Japan pledged $4.5 billion more in aid for Ukraine, including $1 billion in humanitarian funds. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay the bills. Yes, we found that if we pay our bills, we could fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for over 12 years now. Oh my gosh. And we have you to thank for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. So thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, wherever, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of most of those. Kelly takes care of the others. So thank you, guys. Follow me on those media platforms too, social media platforms. And you can do so by following me at Justice Putnam at wherever. So I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime, and that's where you can read the actual articles that we draw such great inspiration from. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and most importantly, if you could pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, wherever podcasts can be found, that would be really good. Good for us. And you'll be able to find podcasts everywhere except on Stitcher because you just can't. And you know why. Because I've been telling you for quite a while. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is Out of Raw Story by Sarah K. Burris. Excuse my nose. Let's see here. Senator Rick Scott, you know, Repug of Florida. Yeah. Is sounding the alarm on communist garlic, the Cato Institute Scott Lincecum pointed out yesterday, Thursday. The Republican sent a letter to the Washington, D.C. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, pointing out that the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 gives the Commerce Secretary the power to investigate imports that could be national security threats, and garlic from China is one of them. I write to request such an investigation into imports from communist China of all grades of garlic, whole or separated into constituent cloves, whether or not peeled, chilled, fresh, frozen, provisionally preserved, or packed in water or other natural substance, and the threat they pose to U.S. national security. Wow. Food and safety and security is an existential emergency that poses grave threats to our national security, public health, and economic prosperity. Oh, really? Now he's concerned about it. Now, he doesn't give any specific security cause for the concern from the bulbs. The website Spices Inc., and a report by U.S. Today, says most of the garlic sold in the U.S. comes from China, more than 60%. And of domestic garlic, the California Farmland Trust says that 90% of commercial garlic comes from that state. Emily Waxter Pettis of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Black people make up about 38% of Mississippi's population, but a new study shows that black women were 4 times more likely to die of causes directly related to pregnancy than white women in the state in 2020. The Mississippi State Department of Health published the findings on Wednesday. The committee said 80% of pregnancy-related deaths in Mississippi between 2016 and 2020 were considered preventable, and cardiovascular disease and hypertension remain top contributors to maternal mortality. Women need comprehensive primary care before, during, and after pregnancy, but many people live in areas where health care services are scarce. The Maternal Mortality Review Committee was formed in 2017, and its members include physicians, nurses, public health experts, and others who work in health care. The committee found that from 2016 to 2020, Mississippi's pregnancy-related mortality rate was 35.2 deaths per 100,000 live births. That study did not provide a comparable 5-year number for the U.S., but said the national rate was 21.1 deaths per 100 live births in 2019 and 32.9 deaths per 100,000 live births in 2020. Mississippi has long been one of the poorest states in the U.S., with some of the highest rates of obesity and heart disease. A state health department program called Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies offers care management and home visits for pregnant women and for infants who are at risk of having health problems. The committee recommended that Mississippi leaders expand Medicaid to people who work in low-wage jobs that don't provide private health insurance, a policy Tate Reeves, the governor, has long opposed. Earlier this year, Reeves signed a law allowing postpartum Medicaid coverage for a full year, up from 2 months. Medicaid expansion is optional under the health care overhaul that then-President Barack Obama signed into law in 2020. And Mississippi is one of 10 states that have not taken the option. And those non-expansion states all have Republican governors, Republican-controlled legislatures, or both. The party of life doesn't care if you die. Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The University of Michigan has launched a new effort to fight anti-Semitism and promote religious inclusion amid a rise in hate-inspired attacks globally. Its president said yesterday, Thursday. The university is establishing the Raoul Wallenberg Institute on its Ann Arbor campus, which will use research and scholarship on anti-Semitism to find ways to fight it, President Santaoto told its Board of Regents. The institute is named after the Michigan alumnus and Swedish diplomat credited with saving thousands of Jewish lives during the Holocaust by issuing passports and sheltering Jews in buildings that he marked as Swedish territory. The university community, which is home to 6,500 Jewish students, was the scene of anti-Semitic and homophobic vandalism at 2 off-campus fraternity houses in July that included broken windows and a swastika spray-painted at one of the locations. The university's announcement came amid increasing fears of anti-Semitism worldwide and fallout from Israel's war on Gaza, which faces heightened criticism for the rising Palestinian death toll. Odo on Tuesday said he has barred students from voting on 2 controversial and divisive resolutions related to the Israel-Hamas war. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, no clothes for the Emperor. The question I had when I first heard about Ridley Scott's Napoleon project was, well, how long or how many parts is this going to be? The French revolutionary turned dictator turned emperor was version 1.0 of the modern era's several rogue heads of state, and his story has been rendered by everyone from serious academics to cartoon makers. So the next question becomes, what's going to be new and fresh here, or at least entertaining? Well, turns out not much, despite its moments. Scott can execute action sequences, and the battles depicted here, especially Austerlitz, are some of the best you'll ever see. But scenes don't make a movie, especially with one as broad a mission as Napoleon, where the effort is being undertaken to examine the breadth of his life. Joaquin Phoenix is the lead, and his abilities are not to be questioned, but it's unclear what he's being asked to do here. He's a daring commander, but an uneven strategist, has unparalleled charisma, which we get to see in like one 30-second scene, but is a maladroit lover. On screen, he looks mostly perplexed. There's decent support here, especially from Vanessa Kirby in the more focused role of Josephine. At age 86, it might be too late for Scott to make the switch, but a streaming series may have allowed for more in-depth and nuanced explorations of some of the Cliff Notes history that flies by here. That format wouldn't likely get as easy a pass on historical accuracy or even its weirdly, barely French look. Supposedly the phrase "the emperor has no clothes" originated in the Napoleonic era. Perhaps this would have been a better title for this one, which lands not quite darkly funny enough for farce, but not serious enough for PBS. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Karen Hopkin. Swimming against a current can be tough, but imagine having to do it in a fluid with the consistency of corn syrup. That's more or less the challenge faced by mammalian sperm as they race to reach an egg.
That's such a hard race for sperm. It's like a very tough marathon.
Reza Nosrati is a mechanical engineer at Monash University in Melbourne. He says that sperm are not deterred by tide or averted by viscosity. In fact, Reza and his team have found that having to navigate the physiological slalom of the female reproductive tract actually helps sperm swim with optimal efficiency and may guide them to their desired destination. The results appear in the journal Cell Reports Physical Science.
When you look at the female reproductive tract, I think it's been known for such a long time that it's a very complicated environment.
As sperm swim upstream, they make their way through secretions that vary in thickness and flow rate. One of the first hurdles comes at the cervix, the gateway to the uterus.
Right at the port of entry to the cervix, there is a very strong flow because of mucous secretions by the cells within the cervix.
That current helps to flush out any harmful disease-causing bacteria, which are not known to be strong swimmers.
Then it's kind of like a barrier and a filter to keep the environment essentially favorable for fertilization.
And once sperm get to the fallopian tube, where fertilization typically takes place, they face not only fluids that are gooier, but a course whose undulating curves lead to blind alleys.
And to the increasing level of geometrical confinement that the sperm need to leverage to find their way forward.
But rather than hampering the swimmer's progress, maybe these changes serve as cues, or clues, that give the cleverest cells a leg, or in this case a flagellum, up.
Would that be a mechanism that enables sperms of better quality or smarter cells to adjust their swimming behavior in order to gain some competitive advantage over millions of other sperm cells that are swimming in the reproductive tract.
To find out, Reza and the gang put bull sperm to the test.
We use bull sperm because it's, in terms of its morphology and shape and beating behavior, is quite similar to human sperm.
But they didn't want to look at sperm by the handful.
We wanted to study these behaviors at the single cell level, looking at the same cell while we're replacing the flow, while we're changing the viscosity.
And they wanted to focus on the flagellum because it's that whip-like tail that propels a sperm forward.
Now, how that flagellum beating and how the movement of that structure changes in response to change in flow condition was completely ignored.
So, the researchers built a sperm-sized testing arena, or in engineer speak.
We designed a microfluidic channel.
Farron Yazdan-Perast is a research fellow in mechanical engineering at Monash University. She says each microfluidic channel
had 3 different inlets for different viscosities, so we can expose sperm to different viscosities, and also we had different flow rates to also mimic the fluid condition in the female reproductive tract.
To make sure the sperm didn't swim out of her microscopic field of view, Farron tethered their heads to the chamber floor, which was also key to keeping an eye on things once the researchers cranked open the faucet.
The flow could push the cells out of our observation window.
But with the sperm head stuck to the surface, the researchers were free to fiddle with the fluid dynamics.
And then I'm looking at the cell while it can't go anywhere. Then we could see in real time how that cell responds to that change in the environment.
So, after all this setup, what did they find?
What we observed was that the viscosity had a more dominant role than the shear rate in influencing the sperm flagellal waveform and the overall sperm behavior.
And I think it was a little bit surprising. Like when we started this study, I was expected to see a more dominant effect from shear rate than viscosity. But we actually realized it's the other way around. The viscosity plays a more crucial role.
When the sperm are swimming through fluid that's more syrupy,
they reduce their flagellar beat amplitude. Then they beat with a smaller wave. Those cells who can demonstrate this type of behavior actually swim in a way that is more energy efficient.
And that behavior could give them a biological boost.
Maybe there's another cell which is trying much harder, but they're not doing it the right way and they can't propel forward.
So a sperm that's able to change gears and breeze effortlessly along,
that would be the sperm that can reach the site of fertilization quicker and get to the egg.
Reza says the findings could advance fertility treatments, in which a clinician chooses which sperm to present to an egg.
Maybe when it comes to treatment strategies, we need to move towards media that are more viscous and more closely mimic those properties of the in vivo fluids, because that can potentially lead to selecting better cells and a strategy which is better informed by that natural swimming behavior.
In other words, make the sperm work for it.
I think if you have a sample which have cells, relatively motile cells, then making the race a little bit tougher increases your chance of getting the best cell.
Whether a viscosity challenge could lead to better outcomes for treatments like IVF.
We need to do animal studies to make sure what we are essentially hypothesizing makes sense.
While they wait for those results, Reza and Farron will continue to talk about their work. Or try to.
It's a bit weird to start a conversation about sperm and these kind of things.
I think starting talking about it is always difficult.
Yeah.
But when you start it, especially in parties or stuff like that, people will follow up and they remember it.
Even without the party, I suspect I may have tethered bull sperm stuck in my head for some time to come. Science Quickly is produced by Jeffrey Delvisio, Tulika Bose, Kelso Harper, and Corinne Leong. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And visit scientificamerican.com for updated and in-depth science news. For Scientific American's Science Quickly, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. Even if you are a safe, experienced driver, accidents can happen at any time. Young children are especially at risk for injury and death in a motor vehicle crash. Dr. Erin Sauber-Schatz is a researcher with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of keeping children properly restrained in motor vehicles. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you.
Erin, how many children are killed or injured each year in a motor vehicle crash in the U.S.?
In 2013, 638 children aged 12 and under died in a crash, and over 127,000 were injured.
How effective have child safety seats and other safety devices been in preventing injuries and death among children?
Car seats and booster seats are very effective at preventing injury and death in a crash, but the most effective seat is the one that parents use to buckle their kids on every drive.
Where's the safest place for children to ride in a car?
The back seat is the safest place for children to ride in a car, buckled in an age and size appropriate car seat, booster seat, or seatbelt.
How long should a child ride in a safety seat?
Children should use a car seat until they're at least 5 years old, and a booster seat until the adult seatbelt fits properly. The adult seatbelt fits properly when the lap belt lays across the upper thighs, not the stomach, and the shoulder belt lays across the shoulder, not the neck.
Erin, where should parents go in their community to get help installing and using car seats?
Parents can get one-on-one help free of charge from a certified child passenger safety technician. You can find a tech near you at cert.safekids.org and click on Find a Tech. Another option is to check with your local police or fire department.
Erin, where can listeners get more information about restraining children properly in motor vehicles?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov and type in the search box, Child Passenger Safety.
Thanks, Erin. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Erin Sauber-Schatz about the importance of keeping kids safe in a motor vehicle. Remember, for children under the age of 13, properly restrain them in the back seat. If you're unsure about how to install or use car seats, check with your local police or fire department. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt, and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Bank Strong, and the Ad Council.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma wants to go back to the good old days when men were men. I'm Bill Newman. This is the Civil Liberties Minute, and that was the beginning of a recent editor's letter in The Week magazine, which continued after When Men Were Men, quote, and members of Congress routinely pummeled each other into bloody oblivion. What prompted this comment was, of course, the recent hearing where Senator Mullen, who, having taken umbrage at a social media post by the witness, Teamsters President Sean O'Brien, challenged the witness during his testimony to a fist fight, yelling at him to, quote, stand your butt up. The committee chair, Senator Bernie Sanders, gavelled the would-be pugilists into submission by insisting to Senator Mullen that he was, after all, and we quote, a senator. After the brouhaha, Senator Mullen refused to apologize and noted to Fox News that duels and brawls among federal elected officials were not uncommon in Washington in the 1800s and suggested that fistfights today might help restore respect for Congress. The senator's post-hearing remarks did not mention that the United States Senate, not so long ago, was often referred to as the world's greatest deliberative body. The Senate as the world's greatest deliberative body. Now, that, may we suggest, would be the good old days. And we can all hope that those good old days are not gone forever. This Uncivil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day 38 tradesmen met in Columbus, Ohio, to found the American Federation of Labor. There was an urgent need to form a new national organization for skilled workers. The Knights of Labor had organized workers regardless of skill. They included women and African Americans among their ranks. But they were rocked by a sharp and swift decline that year. There was an anti-labor backlash after the Haymarket incident the previous spring. Many tradesmen were looking to form a different kind of federation than the Knights had offered. Julie Green, author of Pure and Simple Politics, states the new AFL differed from the Knights of Labor on 3 core issues. First, these trade unionists were less concerned with the broad social reforms the Knights promoted. Instead, they wanted to work toward the economic concerns of their members. They didn't like the mixed assemblies the Knights insisted upon, which often included non-workers. Second, the craftsmen hoped for full autonomy of the trade unions within a loose federation. They didn't like the centralized structure of the Knights and the dominant role Terence Powderly played. Finally, they didn't like the jurisdictional subordination the Knights subjected the trade unions to. They elected Samuel Gompers of the Cigar Makers International Union as their first president, who served until his death in 1924. The early AFL reflected many of the Knights' traditions, including industrial unions and socialist politics. They fought for injunction reform and the 8-hour day. Within 15 years, the AFL would grow to represent millions in predominantly white, skilled craft unions that embodied business unionism. In 1935, the demands for industrial organizing would split the House of Labor and the AFL.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit under cloudy conditions, which will become partly cloudy this afternoon. Highs only in the mid-40s today. Winds light and variable. Some clouds overnight. Lows in the low 30s. Winds light and variable. We did have some rain overnight and may get a sprinkle or two this today, and then a bit of a drying out period until late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. Mostly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs in the mid-40s, winds light and variable, and it looks like quite a bit of rain coming in on Sunday, Monday. Pollen is still rated as none here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 31 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.4 inches. Visibility is at 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 51 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 51 and clear with a wind advisory. Rome is 48 degrees and partly cloudy. Bagram is 40 degrees and clear. Kiev is 27 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 52 and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 65 degrees with rain showers. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and sunny. Chicago, Illinois is 50 degrees and sunny with heavy wind. And New York, New York is 46 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Dasha Litvinova of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A Moscow court extended pre-trial detentions for 3 lawyers who represent imprisoned opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The 3 were arrested in October on charges of participating in an extremist group, lawyers representing a client. And it's a case widely seen as a means to ramp up pressure on the politician. The Basmany District Court ruled that Vadim Kobzev, Igor Serginin, and Alexei Lipster will remain behind bars until at least March 13th. According to Navalny's allies, authorities accuse the lawyers of using their status as defense attorneys to pass letters from the imprisoned politician to his team. Horrors. Both Navalny's Foundation for Fighting Corruption and a vast network of regional offices were outlawed as extremist organizations in 2021, a step that exposed anyone involved with them to prosecution. Since January of 2021, Navalny has been serving a 19-year sentence on charges of extremism. Opposing Vlad. Putin's fiercest foe, he campaigned against official corruption and organized major anti-Kremlin protests. His 2021 arrest came upon his return to Moscow from Germany, where he recuperated from nerve agent poisoning that was blamed on the Kremlin. Navalny has since been handed 3 prison terms and spent months in isolation in prison for minor infractions. He has rejected all charges against him as politically motivated. His team says that by targeting his lawyers, authorities are seeking to increase his isolation further. For many political prisoners in Russia, regular visits from lawyers, especially in remote regions, are a lifeline, as it allows their families to know their lawyers have seen them, and also lets the prisoners report any abuse by prison officials. The Kremlin has been carrying out an unrelenting crackdown on dissent in recent years and ramped up pressure after invading Ukraine on February of 2022. Since then, and until earlier this month, almost 20,000 people have been detained for speaking out or protesting against the war, while 776 people have been implicated in criminal cases over their anti-war stance.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Mari Yamaguchi of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida pledged $4.5 billion to Ukraine, including $1 billion in humanitarian aid to help support the war-torn country's recovery effort in an online summit of leading industrial nations. Kishida made the announcement late Wednesday in Tokyo while hosting his last Group of 7 summit as this year's chairperson. The $1 billion in humanitarian and recovery aid includes funding for generators and other power supplies for the Ukrainian people to survive the winter, as well as measures to clear mines planted by Russia. The remaining $3.5 billion includes funding for credit guarantees for World Bank loans to Ukraine. Japan has donated more than $7 billion to Ukraine since the war started, mostly for humanitarian assistance and military equipment limited to non-lethal weapons because of legal limitations under its pacifist constitution. But yesterday, Thursday, Ukrainian ambassador to Japan, Sergei Korsunsky, said his country and Japan are discussing a possible Japanese provision of anti-missile defense and anti-drone equipment. Seiji Kahara, acting Secretary General of Kishida's governing party, said Japan has pacifist policies, but the country will continue a dialogue on providing the most helpful support for Ukraine by using Japan's expertise, including mine clearing. U.S. Ambassador to Japan Rahm Emanuel, citing Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, praised Japan's additional supply of generators to help people survive the severe winter weather. Japan is discussing easing its weapons export restrictions to allow equipment co-developed by other countries to be provided to Ukraine. Japan seeks to bolster its defense industry amid growing threats from China, North Korea, and Russia, while expanding support for countries under invasion like Ukraine. The G7 members agreed to impose new sanctions on Russia, including banning the country's diamonds. The G7 leaders, in their joint statement, said they will introduce import restrictions on non-industrial diamonds mined, processed, or produced in Russia, followed by additional restrictions on the import of Russian diamonds processed in third countries. And as we know, the G7 is comprised of the U.S., Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the European Union. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here on Monday, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.